On the afternoon of July 3rd, 1993, a military transport truck drives down the road in Knox County, Kentucky. Its cargo was never disclosed to the public. Its destination doesn't exist on any map or record. Almost every detail about this convoy was erased, except for one. It never made it to where it was going. This isn't a true story. Kentucky isn't a real place. It's actually a fictional location created for the isometric zombie survival game Project Zomboid. And in that game, Kentucky, and subsequently the world, is consumed by an unstoppable airborne zombie virus. These are the facts, they are not disputable. But what isn't clear, even years after the game's timeline was pieced together, is how exactly it all began. Many theories exist, from alien spores, tainted burger meat, experimental drugs gone wrong, but one explanation stands out, only because it lines up with what little scraps of official information we actually have. A top-secret military operation in Knox County, a truck carrying secret materials, and an accident that might have caused the end of the world.
Is accessible.
LBMW News. A military transport truck carrying classified materials overturned near Marsh Ridge earlier today. Officials insist there's no danger to the public, though the area remains sealed off by military personnel.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of
On July 4th, a newspaper in Knox County reported, "No danger to the public after crash, Army says." The contents of the truck were not revealed to the public for operational reasons, and would pose little danger even if they came into contact with the public, which they did not. But what was on that truck? And if it posed little danger to the public, why is it being kept a secret? Well, its destination and origin could be the key to figuring out its clandestine payload. Based on this article, we can gather a good amount of information on where the truck crashed and where it was heading. Our first clue comes from the beginning of the article. A military truck carrying hazardous waste overturned just north of Marsh Ridge. Marsh Ridge on a map is here, and the closest road to the north is here, Route 60. Real quick, editing Chris here, this isn't actually Route 60. Route 60 is located up here, but it is mentioned by name in the news report. I think this is just oversight from the developers rather than a contradictory piece of evidence. Another witness mentions it was on Route 60, but that it was south of the farmer's market, which is located here. They may seem like contradictory statements at first, but both can be true, and the distance separating the two locations isn't really that far. So, we have this strip of highway here where the truck could have crashed. If we look at the image in the report, we can see the truck crash was in a very densely wooded area. And if we reference Project Zomboid's maps, we can see that would eliminate most of this section here. Now, to find out the direction it was heading, we can look again at that photo and see that the truck spun out on the side of the road with power lines, and the power lines on the map are always on the north side of the road, meaning the truck was heading westbound down Route 60 almost directly above Marsh Ridge when it crashed. But what was its route exactly? Its most likely place of origin was the Fort Knox military installation, not seen in-game but in the real-life version of Kentucky, and located incredibly close to both the fictional and real-life Marsh Ridge and Route 60. Although, if we are to follow Route 60 westbound, it just sort of ends, going from a 2-lane down to a 1-lane before stopping just south of Rosewood, located here. This may seem like a dead end, but if we keep following it west down these back roads, we eventually stumble across this, a top-secret military installation in the middle of the forest in Knox County. Not just that, but it also goes 17 stories below ground, and seems to be equipped with some kind of biological research center. So, it's very possible the truck was carrying something incredibly dangerous on board, like a virus or toxic materials, despite official claims. In fact, the US government has a history of moving sensitive materials in what might otherwise appear to be unimportant and mundane vehicles. And they also have a history of lying through their teeth to the American public.
The International Atomic Energy Agency confirmed in the 1990s that Saddam Hussein had an advanced nuclear weapons development program.
But that's a little off topic. So, could a military truck carrying a weaponized virus really be the cause of the outbreak in Project Zomboid? It seems pretty likely, when we also factor in that Muldra was one of the first places to report on the outbreak, and its proximity to the crash cannot be ignored. Interestingly enough, though, Muldra in this theory is both a strength and a weakness. Like I said, Muldra is the first place that publicly began reporting signs of an outbreak. And, while close, it is still located a good ways to the north of March Ridge. This creates a problem since March Ridge is so much closer. Why didn't they experience an outbreak first? Well, March Ridge is a military town housing lots of soldiers and people who work directly for the government. Information here could be a lot easier to control and get a grip on. Perhaps the military took the proper procedures when dealing with the Knox Infection in March Ridge and cleared the town, but perhaps someone or something slipped out and went north to Muldra. The town itself is also the biggest urban population center to the crash, so controlling the narrative here would be a bit more of a challenge than in March Ridge. However, that brings us to our next issue. The information, or lack thereof, was already being controlled days prior to the crash. On July 2nd, Knox News reported, widespread telephone outages in Knox area. Knox Telecommunications has apologized for an hours-long outage on its networks, which continues at the time of printing, leaving thousands of Knox residents without access to telephone and internet services. This happened exactly one day before the truck crash, and this telecommunications blackout would continue indefinitely in Knox County until the world collapsed. It is a rather interesting coincidence given everything we already know. It points somewhere in the direction of a cover-up or planned accident. But it's also likely the communications blackout was indeed another accident, and when the outbreak began, the military hijacked it and kept it in place indefinitely. Unfortunately, this is merely speculation on my end. A few days after the truck crash on July 7th, the military would completely blockade Knox County in an attempt to contain the Knox Infection, a rather quick and decisive decision for a government that claimed at the time to have no knowledge of what the Knox Infection really was. So perhaps it was planned, some kind of bioweapons test gone wrong. The evidence to some degree supports this theory. But at the same time, there's also a healthy amount of counter-evidence that suggests it could have been a genuine accident. A dangerous omen to the underwhelming safety standards in place in Knox County. Maybe the crash had nothing to do with what came next. But maybe it had everything to do with it.
This is Jackie J.
You're on the NLR network. The end of another troubled day in Kentucky. It is flu-like. It leads to panic. It leads to confusion. There is no evidence of fatalities within the exclusion.
You're back with Knox Talk Radio. Today we're talking to people who made it out of the exclusion zone. Bobby, tell us what happened.